Oh, shoot. Okay, I'm going to let in persons now.
Okay. Um, Good day, everyone. We're going to start at 2:05. So give us 4 more minutes to just, wait on others to join.
Hi again, everyone. Just reminding you all that we start at 2:05 p.m., not 6:05, but 2:05 p.m. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Okay, welcome to our open source internship meetup for 2022. This is going to be the first of a series of meetup where we are talking about how you can become a part of the Google Summer of Code program or the Calico Challenge program for 2022. I'm going to do the introductions and turn over to our founder, O'Shane Bailey. Welcome again. So, of course, my name is Latifa Smelly, and I'm the Communications Officer for Jamaican Developers. Um, as a reminder, you can reach out to me if you know anyone who's interested in speaking at an event, or if you have any projects that you're willing to present at our demo day events. With us today, we have our founder and leader for the session, O'Shane Bailey. He is a full stack engineer and co-founder of Osub Limited, or primary sponsor. He is a full stack engineer who's worked with various technologies with over a decade of experience at working with technologies such as Python and JavaScript. He has worked both with government and private sector organizations, and he is also both a past alumni and past mentor of the Google Summer of Code program. And so, of course, there's no better person in our diaspora to speak to you about those programs. Without further ado, O'Shane?
Okay, good day, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah,
Yes,
can
sir.
hear
Okay,
you.
great. All right, so thank you, Latifa. As mentioned, I'm O'Shane Bailey. I'm co-founder of Osub and, of course, one of the co-founder of Jamaican Developers community. I participated in Google Summer of Code as a student back in 2017. Got a lot of interesting skill set and techniques picked up during that time. I worked with the Prune Foundation, which is a Python, enterprise Python CMS. And I end up also, traveling to, I think it was Spain at the time at a conference speaking about what I did on Google Summer of Code for that year. Of course, later on in this discussion, I'll definitely touch base on what Google Summer of Code is, what Calico challenges, and some minor stuff about open source. But I just want to give you guys a bit of feel of who I am if you haven't met me as yet. So apart from 2017 Google Summer of Code, the following year 2018 I mentored for the said open source organization, that's the Prone Foundation, where I mentored couple of Indian students that participated and contributed to the core of Prone at the time. All right, shifting over to a bit of like what open source is. As you know, open source is a big term in the tech field. It's pretty much where developers like myself and many others around the world, contribute to free open code that anyone can literally take on, modify. Of course, you've probably heard about MIT and different license. But it generally create an environment for developers to, share code, contribute to the improvement of a particular code base or so forth. So like, for example, many Node packages, NPM, Python packages, PHP packages that you may be using in your own project, those are most likely open source code, free and open source code that any developer could just import in their project, modify, and also contribute back to the source code for that project. So Google, alongside many other companies around the world, have their own programs to help, push forward the participation of developers contributing back to these type of source code. And many of these source code can easily be found on GitHub. Hold on, let me share my screen. Latifa, I'm going to share my screen, so I'm going to take over for a bit. I'm going to start the recording as well. I do apologize about that. So starting with Google Summer of Code. Google Summer of Code is pretty much an international program done by Google to increase and encourage the participation of open source, not just from individuals in the US, but it's pretty much worldwide. Anyone can participate once they're over the age of 18, and they get to work with mentors from different open source community or organizations. Funnily, last year, we invited Stephanie Taylor, which is the program manager at Google for Google Summer of Code. And she gave a nice intro about Google Summer of Code, what it's about, the requirements, the eligibility, and what it really takes to complete Google Summer of Code and the success rate of students. Sadly, though, not there hasn't been many Jamaican applicants, or I should say Caribbean applicants, and it's one of the things that we want to change in the coming months and future. So this session, as Latifa mentioned, is part of a series of getting more and more students as well as individual familiar with open source, familiar with these internship programs that we can take a developer from whether novice, whether experienced, to get them to contribute to open source. And of course, there's stipend and additional benefits involved. Please note, as mentioned, this is like a three-part Google Summer of Code, open source, and Calico. But before we continue, how much of us know about like Google Summer of Code or open source? I'm going to launch a poll, and you can indicate whether you know about any of these programs that I've mentioned, and I'll then break down afterwards. So you should see a poll pop up shortly. Just indicate how much of you heard about any of these programs or terms for. Great. Oh, wow. Interesting. Okay, it seems like most of us that are here are indicating okay, it's not the first time hearing about Google Summer of Code. Most indicate that they are students. Most haven't contributed to open source, and most have been using they used Git before. So that's good. You've used Git before, so I'm also assuming that you probably use GitHub at some point, even though the third question about contributing to open source is mostly no. So diving in to, for example, GitHub. So GitHub, of course, is one of the famous Git to no, wait, let me check in the chat. So GitHub is one of the most popular platforms that push open source contribution. It tends to host a lot of repository, open source repository, whether from a particular individual, whether for a particular company or product. So for example, when I mention Prone, which is a company that I contributed to back in 2017, they have quite a number of projects and source code that they tend to host on GitHub. And many of these, projects or packages I've contributed to. So for example, you probably heard about Apache, which, most of the or websites and so forth are used to run and host many websites around the world. They also have a bunch of open source projects. Of course, any company of interested in, you can easily find more about them on GitHub, some of the projects that they've done. Well, Oracle is pretty much the owners of Apache, and of course, there's the Apache organization on GitHub. And for example, you could pretty much go and look at some of their projects, some of their code, and pretty much contribute back to these. So it's pretty much a place where a lot of source code for projects, for packages, plugins, and so forth tend to be hosted and shared among developers to, reuse, contribute back, and also improve. And again, Google Summer of Code and Calco, two different programs geared towards getting more and more participants contributing back to these, free open source repository to improve the software functionality and basically the quality. So switching, before I continue, anyone have any question about open source or open source or anything that they didn't understand about open source before I move into Google Summer of Code, back to Google Summer of Code? You can unmute or ask it in the chat. Okay, so I guess that's a no. All right, shifting back to Google Summer of Code. As mentioned, so Google Summer of Code gears towards, participation in open source, getting, contributors, developers above 18 to, contribute back to these repository. At first, Google Summer of Code was geared towards university students, getting university students to contribute. But since 2022, they actually opened the door for not just university students being a part of Google Summer of Code, but anyone above 18. Of course, there's certain limits, like if individual done Google Summer of Code 3 times, they can't, participate again. Some of the benefits of contributing, and of course, I'm using some of the information from last year, is find how generally works is pretty much you, when you're applying, you find an organization that you might be interested in. Google will announce a list of organization in late February, April that are open to take on contributors, not just students. So you look at that list of individuals, list of organizations. Pick one that you think you're interested in, whether it's based on the language, so it's whether it's based on the scope, the technology, or so forth, because you may find yourself be interested in AI. You may find yourself being interested in game development, web development, Flutter, mobile apps, whatsoever. There's always in organization or a company that lists some of those projects that you can take on. So first, of course, you identify what you're interested in, find a company that match your interests, and of course, you can just if you don't want to take the interest route, you can also look at the companies what they offer and then choose based on what you think you can manage, what you think is best for you, and so forth. Once you find like an organization, you pretty much introduce yourself, get familiar with their tech stack and any guideline, and you can just easily start fixing some minor issues and so forth. As I said, this slide is from last year, so I didn't necessarily prepare a new slide because most of Google Summer of Code program, most of it is repetitive. They only introduce one or two changes each year. And again, one of the changes for 2022 is pretty much they open it to the broader scope and not just making it for students or university students only. All right, so generally, you will need to write a proposal, and Google Summer of Code provides you a bunch of materials about the process, the timeline. So as you can see, this is pretty much the timeline for Google Summer of Code. I'll drop it in the chat. So this is timeline where the organizations will pretty much be announced between February 21, between February 21 and March 17. Sorry, March 7. And once the organization are announced between March 7th to April 4th, you start to figure out what you want to do, which organizations that you think you want to apply to, and between April 4th to April 19th, that's pretty much the application period for Google Summer of Code. Application period is pretty much you sending a proposal of a project or a task or some milestones that you want to do for that one of those listed open source organizations. So once of course you accepted, of course there will be a review process, whether you contributed to open source before, if you're new, if you have time and so forth. We are going to walk through all of that with each of you guys, and like helping with understanding how to contribute to open source, how to write software tests, and based on certain languages frameworks, we're also going to keep workshop sessions around those. Of course, it's also based on how much of you guys are interested in a particular language, framework, or so forth. We look into what are your needs and what most people would want to, gain an understanding before they, apply. So once you application period over, you then get to like a community bonding period, and that's pretty much after the April 19th, and community bonding period tends to be April 20th to May 20th to June 12th. And and this is assuming you got accepted, and after the June 12th, the coding period begins on June 13th all the way to end of August. And coding period tend to happen occurs in the sense that based on the milestones, the timelines, and the deliverables that you mentioned in the proposal, you will be graded and evaluated based on what you propose. Of course, in between the coding period, you have evaluation period where they take probably a day or two to just look at their progress, see if you met all of the deliverables and requirements. Once you do, you move on to the next coding period. You may be wondering, okay, I jumped in the timeline, I jumped in like what Google Summer of Code, but I didn't mention why should you actually participate, what's the benefit, and what are some of the things that you pretty much get at the end of this program. So I'll get into that shortly. All right, let me see. Where is it? Hello? Yeah, okay. So benefits from Google Summer of Code are things like, okay, you will be paid a stipend. I'm not They haven't posted what the stipend is for Jamaica at the moment. But when I did the Google Summer of Code, the stipend per evaluation, well, the total stipend for Google Summer of Code when I did it was around 3,600 US dollars for the 2.5 months. Last year's stipend, I think it was around the same, between 2,200 to 3,600. I don't remember, but I can drop it in the Jamaican developers community chat, or one of the forum posts that we need after this session. So you get a stipend. You get a stipend. Uh, and that stipend is going to be paid in 3 parts because there's 3 evaluation period. One is at a month after well, 4 weeks after the program start, a middle evaluation period, and then at the end of the coding period, which is pretty much at the end of the GSOC period, another evaluation will be done, and that's where a final payment of stipend will be sent out. Other benefits, of course, you get a certificate of completion from Google Summer of Code. You get I think it's a MasterCard with Google Summer of Code, written on it, which they're using Pioneer. So that's how you be getting paid. They would send you a Pioneer card that you can use and collect your funds, and it's pretty much a MasterCard, so it can be used anywhere around the world. You'll be getting other things like books, Google Summer of Code T-shirt, and some additional swags. Apart from that, there's opportunity of traveling. Again, I traveled to Spain in 2017 when I did Google Summer of Code. And I also traveled to Japan in 2018 when I did when I mentored some Indian students for Google Summer of Code. But it all based on the organizations that you go with, because some, they keep annual conference, some don't. So it all depends on the organization that you choose for Google Summer of Code. But before I continue, anyone have any questions thus far? And I do apologize about the background noise if you're hearing.
Yeah, I have a question. What's the connection between Google Summer of Code and Palisados? Is Palisados one of the organizations?
Okay, so last year, Palisados got accepted for Google Summer of Code. So the Palisados have a project that they're working on called Talawa, I believe. So they submitted the Talawa project last year to be a part of Google Summer of Code. And Indian students and some Jamaicans, contributed to that open source project. And that open source project, Talawa, is a church management system, if I remember correctly. However, please note, Palisados have like a spin-off of Google Summer of Code, which is totally different, separate from Google Summer of Code, which is called the Calico Challenge. It's pretty much inspired by the Google Summer of Code that they created for targeting Jamaican students. So the Calico is similar to Google Summer of Code, but it only available for Jamaican students. And last year they didn't keep the Calico Challenge, but before that it's been going on for like 4 or 5 years.
Oh, okay, thank you. Are they going to keep it this year as well?
Can you repeat?
Are they going to keep it this year though?
Yes.
It
Yes.
well, yes. Thank you. I haven't gotten the confirmation, but yeah, it seemed like Latifa did. So that would be yes. So this is their open source project called Tarawa. So you can check it out. They tend to get a lot of feedback on it, and a lot of supporters from Jamaica are saying yes to this project. It's a really nice church management system in Flutter because it's a mobile app and there's a web component to it as well. Is the background noise loud? I do apologize about it.
It's not very loud.
Okay.
But they are going to be running both programs in parallel for those who are wondering. So I'll just send around the same message that David Bain sent earlier this year about Calico program running parallel to Google Summer of Code this year.
Okay, great. Someone asked, so will you work in teams or individually? So you will work on your own individually, but you will be guided by a mentor that will give you tips, tricks about how to utilize the source code and documentation, as well as writing tests. The thing is that Google Summer of Code is not just for both Google Summer of Code and Calico is not just for experienced engineers or software developers. It also caters for beginners. Beginners with that has some fundamental knowledge about programming. Um, and of course, any organization that you apply to, it would be nice if you know about them, their documentation, use them before, but they expect at the same time that you may not know much about their source code, documentation, and so forth. So that's one of the reasons why a mentor will be guiding you to just point you in the right direction. And of course, if you have any blockers, any question, feedback, that's pretty much what the mentor is there for. Apart from that, to then talk about the whole team aspect. So open source tends to be like this. Um, you may be, doing the coding on your own, but remember, other individuals are contributing and pushing updates to the source code. So what that means is that even though you're working independently, you do have to take in consideration what others have, contributed, what others did, because say you have Alison, Bob, and then you're John. Alice and Bob work on a functionality that may be similar to what you're working on, and maybe they introduce something that you're working on, and then when you push your code, you realize that, oh, that feature is there. So sometimes you have to keep up to date with what other contributors are doing that may benefit you, or you may of course improve that functionality that they did. So there's like an indirect team collaboration that will happen, but at the end of the day, you're working independently of everyone, but just contributing back to the same source code. So that's one of the benefits. Actually, it prepares you for working in a large team remotely. It prepares you for understanding what it takes to contribute and implement solutions in a large scale application, and it not just test you, challenge you, improve your skills level with just coding, but it also push you to understand the depths of testing, because if you write a particular code and the code is supposed to say 1 plus 2, it gives you 3 or X or so forth. A part of it you probably find out is that you need to write some small tests, whether unit test, integration test, to just prove that what you code works. Because funnily, in different languages, you find out that a simple mathematical formula will output different results in different languages, even though it's supposed to be like output the same thing, because you have to then consider like floating points, or some language angles, like pi and decimals and so forth, and string plus number concatenation, or string plus number to equal back a number. Different language have different ways of the angles, such arithmetics. So that's one of the things that Google Summer Code will prepare you for, building and writing quality software solution with tests backing your code. So do keep that in mind. All right. Let me check if there's any other question about Google Summer Code. Okay, so you will code what you propose when you submit your application, or they give you a. Okay, so it depends. You will code. All right. So with the application period, you're going to write a proposal, and your proposal is pretty much what your intended your intention, or when you come onto the program, what you're going to develop. These are the milestones, these are the deliverables. So for example, Google Summer of Code for me 2017, one of my deliverable was to implement team editor. They didn't have any means of selecting the file system and right clicking on a folder or a file, and then you see those contextual menu, copy, paste, and so forth. So that was one of my deliverables that I mentioned. funnily, those deliverables that I mentioned, even though yes, I'm going to code it because that's my proposal. At times you find that they have a list of bugs, list of features that they want to implement, and you can just look at those bugs, look at those features, and then make a proposal on based on that. And some of these organizations will already have some written proposal or written tasks that you can do, and you just inherit those. Otherwise, from that, you can um, just request or write your own proposal for improvement. Whichever way works, but most students across the globe tend to just inherit the task or proposal that most of these organizations, um, suggested either on their forum, either on the Google Summer of Code list of projects, whatsoever. But yes, and at the end of the day, it's what you propose you'll be implementing. And of course, I should also mention most of what I said regarding, the coding side also applies to Calico. But with the Calico project, Calico is focused on the Tarawa project mainly. I think there's two other projects, but I haven't gotten confirmation if those two others will be in. But it's mainly the Tarawa project you will be contributing to. Like shifting back, all of the FAQs, every single thing about Google Summer Code is pretty much on their website. We did a session last year and early last year and late last year that we will share with you guys, which can answer any additional question that you may have or perks about joining the Google Summer Code program. What I want to get into next is Calico. So as mentioned before, the Calico is a program similar to Google Summer Code, but it's initiated by the Palisades Foundation. And mainly before it was youth students that were doing the Calico challenge. Okay. Yeah. So mainly before it was youth students doing the Calico challenge. And we're working on multiple different projects. The same set, it's a similar setup as Google Summer Code, and you can see the history of it, what students worked on, and so forth. Um, but one of the difference is that with the Calico project, it's easier to get in. It's actually somewhat less work, but it garners and somewhat tailors your experience based on the Jamaican industry. Because some of the technology that is being used by the in the Tower project is pretty much what companies in Jamaica are looking for, especially there's this big increase in software development in Jamaica and of course the world, and of course that's one of the technologies that the Calico project has under its belt. On top of that, the Calico project also utilize, I mean, the stipend for the Calico project is around 1,500. I'm not necessarily sure if there's an increase or decrease. And of course, 1,500 USD. Same for the Google Summer Code. It's in USD. I'm not sure if that stipend has increased or decreased. We'll do up a follow-up session, or post it in our chat to you know clear that up. a bit. Okay, the background music is a bit distracting for me. Um, Let me see. Apart from that, the Calco project, most of the mentors tend to be like people from Jamaica or the Caribbean. So like you probably heard about Jordan Jones from Oliver One. Some of the students that participated in Calco 2020 came back and mentored in 2021, but on the Google Summer Code side. So there are a number of benefits for both, but both of them will pretty much get you into contributing to open source. Why it's good to get into one of these projects and also contribute to open source. As you probably already guess, it's a big boost on your portfolio and your resume if one you have a lot of activities on your GitHub page, because our LinkedIn or list of cases that a lawyer would have would showcase like their history, their talent and experience. Having a GitHub active GitHub portfolio, our profile will pretty much be that for us as developers, because it shows that one, we are participating, we're contributing, we're coding, we have experience in various technologies. And with the open source, you're most likely working indirectly with our developers across the globe. And you have to do conflict resolution. You have to do git merges and so forth. So it shows that one, you're exposed with to remote teams. You're exposed to working with others to resolve a problem, to improve our functionality. There's testing in place, so it shows that you have experience with software testing, even if it's just minor or advanced. So it gives a lot of benefit to your portfolio. And if you're doing resume design and have ever gone to a job interview, you notice that they will ask you what is your GitHub angle or any Git repository angle, whether it's GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, or so forth. So it's a good way of preparing yourself for the working world and presenting your portfolio. All right. With that said, that's pretty much it for now. If there's any other question, you can ask it in the chat. With You can ask it in the chat, or unmute yourself and ask. All right, let's check the chat. Okay, what they use for their backend. Okay, so it depends on the organization.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
like I said before,
Huh?
hold on. There will be many organizations. There are going to be organization like the Prune organization that uses Prune for their backend. There's Apache organization that may use Java, C, C Sharp, whatever. There are going to be many different organizations that use various different type of languages or framework for their backend. So it all depends on what you want. And when the organizations are published, you'll be able to categorize and filter organization based on their language and framework, so you can then know if you're interested in Flutter, if you're interested in Python, if you're interested in PHP, whatever. These are the list of companies that are organizations that are looking for this type of developer. So yes, it depends on the organization, but I think I can assure you that whichever language that you use, there will be an organization that is using that language. Okay. Oh, okay. For Palisados, Palisados uses Flutter for the mobile app. And Flutter is pretty much Dart. Dart is a programming language that kind of resembles a bit of Java, JavaScript, and Python combined. For the web version, they are using Python as their backend engine. I'm not sure what they're using for their front end engine. And one of the ways that you can quickly find out, as you can see, this is the Tower project. They'll indicate that, what they're using right here. If you look over, okay, where it is, if you look over right here, you notice that it's the Android, Dart, open source, Flutter, and so forth. So once you go on any open source organization or open source project, GitHub will inform you, okay, what are the technologies being used in this project as tag, and you can find out more about it. At times, there may be a bunch of issues, bunch of improvements, bunch of bugs and features. So, for example, these are some bugs and problems that the project has. Like you can see, test case failing for password validation. This is a simple fix that you can. I'm assuming it's a simple fix that you can literally just spin up your Flutter console, your Flutter emulator, pull the project, make the fix, push, create a pull request, and once it's accepted, bam, you accepted and they merge it in the source code, then yeah, you pretty much contribute back to the project. One of the sessions that we're going to keep is pretty much how to utilize GitHub, create pull requests and contribute back to open source to get you guys familiar with the process of developing and contributing to open source. So as mentioned, this is the Tower. This is pretty much a mobile app version. If we click on the organization right here, you notice that there is a bunch of other projects. So they have Tower admin, and of course, Tower admin is the backend. And if we check on, okay, yeah. So if we check on the backend tags, the backend is using React, TypeScript, and React and TypeScript. So that means most likely the backend is using Node.js, Node.js and not Python. I do apologize about that. It seems like they changed over the past couple of months or years. So yeah, as you can see, yarn install, which is pretty much Node.js. And Node.js is one of the languages that a lot of Jamaican companies as well as people around the world have started to navigate. So it's a good language, good framework, good thing to look at. And of course, there's React, which you might know, it has been trending since the past couple of years. And of course, if you click on issues, you notice that, okay, they have a bunch of issues right here. Some are bugs, some are improvements, some deal with testing and so forth. And you can just look at one of the bugs that they're having. They tend to describe the bug bug, how to reproduce the bug, send a screenshot of what the bug look like, and then it's left up to someone to resolve it. And of course, once someone makes the change, and they would, push the code, create a pull request. So, for example, there's a pull request right here to refactor the UI of the main section of the organization contribution, and they would pretty much, show the issue number, what it fixed, if they written tests, and then all the change that they made. And of course, it's left up to whoever is reviewing this code to then merge it. So again, there's many YouTube videos and many articles online, but we are going to create a workshop on how to, contribute to open source. Is there any other question? Okay. I take that as no. So with that said, that's it for this session. I do hope you get the benefits, a bit of look into like GitHub, Git, you're aiming to participate, and of course we, as mentioned, we're going to keep other additional sessions where you can find more and more information, and those additional workshop and session to answer any other question that you may have. So with that said, Latifa, I guess you can take over.
Thank you, Shane. So I hope everyone got some valuable information. We're definitely looking forward to having not only more applicants this year, but to have some students actually get into the program. And so we hope to, if you are interested, please do reach out to us at our email, community@caribbean.dev. You can reach out to the same email here as well, events@jamaicans.dev. Or message us on social media, but preferably email us so that we can keep track of your application status and hopefully help you guys to garner some internships with either Calico or Google Summer of Code for summer 2022. With that, thank you all for attending. And before, I just like to give a final shout out to our sponsors, ASUB Limited, Jamaican Developers, Particular Presence Technologies, and Vertis Technology Solutions. With that, everyone, please keep safe from Omicron and take care.